pumpkin pie soda. I thought that was an awesome idea.
Where's ours?
I've got a couple extra. We'll have to share. But that's good, actually. It's pumpkin and cinnamon and ginger ale. Wegmans, yeah. Okay, do I need an introduction? Thank you. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Are you Neil Gaiman? Yeah. Okay, hi, I'm Jim Butcher. Hi, guys. Okay, usually I just do this question and answer style because it's easier for me and I don't have to do any preparation. But in order for this to work, somebody has to ask a question. So here at the back.
I was wondering if the fact that Harry Dresden's always wearing a hat on the title cover of the book is a intentional running issue.
No, not to the publisher. The art department decided that the perfect way to say Wizard Private Eye was to have the wizard staff and the fedora. That's a perfect visual way to say Wizard Private Eye. And while I can see where they're coming from, you know, I kind of got more and more annoying over the years, and so finally I just had to start making jokes about it because that's sort of how I react to things. But so yeah, if you see Harry Dresden in the comic books, that's a little bit more like the one I think of. Although they do tend to give him the giant Doctor Strange collar all the time. It's like, okay, but that's Doctor Strange, so that's kind of cool. Yeah.
Does someone in Marcone's outfit have thwarted Namshill's missing coin?
Does someone in Marcone's outfit have thwarted Namshill's missing coin? And why do you think I would tell you that? Just say it. No, that's part of the story that's still coming. I'm not going to ruin that for you. So I'm not going to.
Okay, I am actually from Chicago and have lived in Chicago my whole life. So I kind of wanted to know how you do your research, because there's some of your scenes, like for example the one in at the Shedd Aquarium at the Oceanarium. I've been there my whole life. I was able to walk through with all of the characters and know exactly what you were talking about. So I wanted to know how you do your research. Do you actually go to the places before you write?
How do I do my Chicago research? Do I actually go there before I write? Not when I first got started, on account of I was a poor college student and had no money. This was also before there was much of an internet. So it wasn't like I could go out and just grab pictures of Chicago because such things did not exist yet. So that was mostly Chicago guidebooks and me trying to get the story written in time for my class assignment to be done. Then later, as I started to make contacts in Chicago, and I'd be able to write my list of Chicago contacts and say, hey, I need to know what the east wall of Graceland Cemetery looks like. Does anybody know what it looks like? I drive by there every day. I'm going to take a picture of it on my phone and email it to you. It's like, woo, okay, that's awesome.
Well, if you ever need pictures.
Now we've got Google Maps and Google Earth, and I can go and I'm writing a scene where I had somebody kick a car in somebody's way, and then I went and down to it was at the Chicago Museum of Art, and with the big lions, and then I went to the Google Maps thing and looked at it, and I'm like, oh, that's totally no parking zone. There's no way there's any cars parked. Oh, but there are these giant stone planters I can have him kick in the way instead. Awesome. So now it's a little bit easier, and I've actually been to Chicago a few times and visited some of it. And like you said, the Shedd Aquarium was someplace that I actually spent some time in. And if you go there and ask them what happens if, like, these walls of the aquarium were to break, like if somebody shot it or something. I need to know for professional reasons. They hate that. We no longer live in a day and age where you can ask questions like that in lighthearted good humor. Yes, sir.
if it wouldn't be a spoiler. All right, in the Dresden Files, you deal a lot. I realize that this is Dresden style. You mainly showcase Hermetic style magic, lots of European ceremonial magic. Are we ever going to see any other styles like Taoist mysticism and such?
They're out there in the Dresden Files universe. You don't run into them a lot because it's centered around Harry, and Harry comes from this very European Roman tradition. So while Harry probably won't go start learning a new paradigm anytime soon because he's going to be busy, it's entirely possible you run into other characters who have different kinds of magic. And you kind of run into that a little bit with Listens to Wind, who has a very different style than the guys from the White Council, proper. But yeah.
I was just wondering if Harry and Molly were ever going to get together.
Harry and Molly ever going to get together? I'm not going to tell you that. That's another one of those things. No, we'll find out. The real issue with Molly is that she's kind of gotten promoted past him now. So that's there's a.
But Karen was always his superior, so.
There's definitely a change in that relationship dynamic in the works, but yeah.
Are we ever going to see Thomas and Ebb kind of interacting like grandfather-grandson capacity?
Thomas and Ebenezer interacting as grandfather. I find that highly unlikely. Oh my gosh! Yeah,
you gotta do it.
Yeah, you just about have to, don't you? Yeah, because I mean, this is backstory that is backstory that I mean, there's tons and tons of stuff that happens in the world that never makes it into the books that I know because it happens in my head. Because I go through in my head, writing all these backstory things for the characters, and that's one of them. Ebenezer is not exactly what you would call fond of the White Court. His whole issue with his daughter and so on. That's going to be horrible. Now I don't see how I can avoid it.
No, you can't now.
I kind of a question on a touchy subject. The Dresden Files TV series.
Okay.
What TV series? I know of no TV series.
Now.
How did you feel about having your characters kind of altered?
It could have been worse. You should have seen his first draft. Eric Dresden, the first draft of that, yeah. I mean, seriously, it could have been worse. Some changes had to be embraced because of the nature of production. It doesn't cost me anything extra to blow up Chicago, but they get all worried about it. So there are some things I could definitely see. Bob the Skull getting changed around was an issue that had to happen because the only thing they could do is either spend their entire special effects budget on Bob the Skull or else have a puppet skull like the cat on Sabrina.
He was the best
thing.
thing.
Good options there, and Terrence Mann kind of sold me on the character before it was over.
Yeah. He was the best part of that
Plus,
show.
in person, he is the nicest guy.
Oh,
He
yeah.
really is. He's a great guy in person.
I thought he did well.
Which is cool. That's the other thing that people got upset about Murphy. Murphy doesn't look anything like Wright. Yeah, but she was the only one on the set who actually read the books. She had her copy and came up and got it signed when I came to visit the set and all. She was like, you need to appear like if we get multiple seasons, you need to appear at least once a season. Yeah, you're right, I do. So it could have been worse, and I like to think of it as it got canceled before they could screw anything up really epic. So I mean, I know why they changed. I mean, they changed the Blue Beetle to the Jeep because otherwise, filming in a Volkswagen Beetle is a nightmare. You've got to have like 6 of them that you can take apart in slightly different ways in order to be able to film in it. So they're like, can't we just use an old army Jeep instead? Doesn't that work the same way if we use a World War II army Jeep, with Harry's magic? I'm like, yeah, actually it would. So that made sense. Yeah.
We've encountered all sorts of different creatures in the books. Is there going to be a dragon feature?
There was a dragon.
Is there going to be? There already has been a dragon.
Well, it's encountered as like sort of a main feature of one of the stories. story.
Yeah, but that's not going to happen until he gets around to breaking the law about time travel. So.
He would never
But
do that.
yeah, we'll get to that. Believe me, we'll get to that. Back here.
Clearly, thresholds are very important in your magic system. Can you discuss them more, sort of in view of your cosmology?
Okay, thresholds in the cosmology of Dresden Files. It's a very technical explanation. There's no place like home. There's always been in many different traditions magic associated with the energy of a household. And it's true because there's a difference between a house and a home. And you know, when you're living in, and I wanted to have a reason that you had to that vampires had to be invited inside, and that other creatures that whip up in the night had to be invited inside your house. And so that was where originally the idea of a threshold came from. It's like, okay, that's the explanation for that. And then as the series kept going, I developed the idea more and more. It's like, oh, wait a minute, this is more than that. This is the magical foundation underneath the house, is this energy that gets associated with the home around, with the home that you build around you. And you know, the more that you invest in this home, the more of a threshold you have, the stronger it is, the bigger a platform you can build stuff onto it on. So, so you know, these kind of ancestral family homes that have been homes for hundreds of years, you know, have these incredibly powerful thresholds that you can build these huge stuff on, and that's why these people get into all these weird occult stuff and all the Lovecraftian novels, you know, because they've got so much they can do with it, in terms of, I mean, in terms of how it goes, I mean, I'm a storyteller. I'm not a wizard. I tell stories, and so I use the thresholds for what I need to do to tell the story, and I try and keep it as consistent as I can. And I've got several people who will call me on it while I'm writing if I get something off. They're very willing to, which is good for me. It's occasionally frustrating, but very good for me, and even more important, it's good for the story. But yeah, right here.
So I'm starting to learn how to write a little bit, and what I'm learning is that
you poor thing.
It's
Why would you do that to
They
yourself?
give you that part. Is that when I'm creating a character, I base it on somebody, or loosely around somebody in my real life or an experience I've had. So how did you get the idea of Mr. and Mouse?
Mr. and Mouse. Mr. is based on a cat that somebody else knew that I never saw. But he was a guy that I hung out in a chat room with online when there were lots of mushes and when I was playing Amber Mush. And Mr. would occasionally there would just be this scrawl of indecipherable text from this guy, and we would know that the cat wanted attention, and everybody in the chat room would say, "Hi, Mr." like that. And meanwhile, you know, this guy online would tell us all about how the mighty Mr. and he would interpret Mr. for us. Whatever Mr. had just said, he would then interpret Mr. He was like the high priest of Mr. And so this entire mythos got built up in my head around Mr. And finally it's like, okay, you know, if I'm gonna have a wizard with a cat, it's gotta be Mr. Mouse is the dog that my dog thinks he is. My dog is a 20-pound Bichon Frise. But he thinks that he is Mouse, and he will go at things exactly as if he is an unstoppable supernatural guardian who can and will destroy them. And so far, I mean, other dogs flip out. He's got the Labrador next door completely cowed. But yeah, my dog. But on the upside, my dog saved my kid from a bear, and I'm pretty sure that Labrador never did that. So,
there's a story behind that.
That's a pretty good story. And you know, the Bichon to save my son from a bear. But anyway, so yeah.
I was wondering, if you could hop into any other universe and write any other character, which one would you choose?
Oh, if I could go anywhere, write any character?
Yeah, any character, any universe of your choice.
I can do that. It's fan fiction. Yeah, you too.
Would you write Solera?
I should write some Alera fan fiction, huh? I've got a whole bunch of stories in my head, and I charted it out, and I don't think I'm going to get to live long enough to write them all unless I can be about 150, which is possible if they can ever figure out how to print out the organs. So I'm working on it. So I mean, there's all kinds of places I still want to go. The place I most want to go is the fantasy world I've been building in my head for my epic fantasy epic for I don't know, like 20 years now. I keep running games there to kind of build the world because There's nothing like a party of freaking players to make you build places you didn't know you were going to have to build. I feel like I'm running frantically ahead of them, laying down floor as they try into this void. So the world is called EOS, and I'm going to write my epic fantasy epic. It's just going to be epic, and it's going to be there one day. And it's called EOS because it stands for every other Saturday, because that's what it is.
That should be the...
I've got my Tolkien-esque elves and dwarves and hobbits fantasy, although it's not, okay, they don't look like elves and dwarves and hobbits, but really they are. That I'm going to write one day when I grow up and I'm a big enough writer.
That should be your tagline, epically epic.
Epic fantasy epic. But I'll get there eventually. That's kind of my destination, my dream destination. If I could write anybody else, I had an idea for a squad of Marines in David Weber's universe that I think would be a lot of fun. Manicorn Marines with their tree cat, the tree cat mascot. But that would be cool. But anyway, back to your standing up.
I'm a huge fan of Codex Alera. Reading it to my 9-year-old. What I love about it is the art is perfect. There's not a wasted subplot anywhere. Can you talk about your preparations for building that story?
Okay, preparations for not wasting things as a writer. First of all, you need to have a certain amount of laziness. Because that way you're not writing a bunch of stuff that you're not using. Next, Codex Alera was that's your typical coming of age fantasy story arc. I mean, he starts off as a boy on a farm because that's where fantasies start. I didn't make it. It's good enough for Frodo. It's good enough for Luke Skywalker. Definitely, it's good enough for a schmuck like me. So I started him as a boy on a farm, and he grows up and he gets to be the king. Because that's what happens to these things. Like fault, that's what happens. And then that was really all there was to it, was to figure out how is he going to progress, how is he going to grow, and sort of thinking about these different things. I modeled Tavi on my kid. So if any of you ever wonder, my son JJ, that's Tavi. I should have more pictures of him on my phone or something so I could show him off, because he's a great looking kid. He's tall, he's strong, he's smart, he's everything I wanted to be when I was his age. But couldn't be on account of I was only 5'9". But I mean, yeah, that was basically how I did it. And then I sort of grew Tavi up into the kid that I thought he would be. And the kid's kind of close. It's sort of surprising, although he did decide that medical school wasn't for him. I think he really only wanted to be there so that he could one day hear Dr. Butcher to surgery. But I think he got to look at how hard the med students have to work, and thought that maybe writing would be better. So now he's got an English degree with a minor in history. I don't know what kind of idiot does that. But he is. So he's working on his own writing. I'm like, well, do you want me to help you, son? No! I will do it myself. It's like, okay, he's been saying that since he was about 2 years old, and there's nothing else to do but listen to him. So. Let's go over here.
Obviously, you have a lot of gaming involved through your Dresden Files series, and you described Harry's approach to magic as engineering. Does the amount of gaming that you did sort of inform how you thought about the magic? Because there have been a few times when I've looked at, you described something that Harry didn't know, thought about my favorite game and go, I would build it that way in the game.
I think the biggest gaming thing that informed me about Magic was we were playing D&D, and we were playing an Underdark campaign with old D&D rules. Old D&D, and I was the party's wizard. Old D&D rules, man, you had to be able to do some math to do old D&D, because when you threw a fireball, it was this much of a radius. It was 33,000 cubic, or 330,000 cubic feet was how much the fireball took up. When you're in a bunch of 10 by 10 tunnels, fireballs go forever. You throw a fireball at the enemy, you throw a fireball at everyone. So by the time the fireball comes out, the situation is desperate, to say the least. And we built it from there because the dynamic of that game, we had a GM who was a real stickler for the math. And so the dynamic of that game changed intensely based upon based upon the mathematics of it and this everybody's in an enclosed space. And so that kind of got to thinking that got me to thinking about it. And when I decided to build Magic for the Dresden Files, I didn't want Magic to be this kind of semi-sentient force that went out and did things on its own. I wanted it to be based on to some degree a model of physics. I wanted it to be a sort of Newtonian magic system where you had to put a certain amount of energy in to get an effect out of it. And you had to be worried about things like efficiency and too much energy going places, and what happens if there's not enough energy, and all sorts of stuff like that. So I never wanted Harry to be a shaman. I wanted him to be a plumber. That he happens to know how to work with his force, and so off he goes to do it. And so that was kind of the model where it came from. But back here in the red and black.
I love some of the characters you brought in that are not human, and there's so many different mythologies that you have managed to successfully research and cross-use in really brilliant ways. And my question to you is, what has been your favorite of these non-humans, like vampires, fae, whatever, that you brought in? What were the most fun to write?
Oh, probably Tooth is the most fun to write. Just because the little fairies, they get to be childlike and wacky, and yet they might cut your throat. And that's really it's great to write them because they kind of get to be clowns and they're a little bit lighthearted, and I kind of enjoy doing that because I've got grim, bleak, throats cut, bullets through hearts, and pixies. And that's fun. And plus occasionally you get to do something awesome like having Toot go up against Shag Nasty. It's like, okay, well, he's not going to win that one, but damn, that little guy's got heart. Wow, am I going to kill him right here? Some kind of way I think.
No, not Toot.
Well, I'm a writer, man. You don't have to be a sadist to be a writer, but it really helps. I said this yesterday, but people asked me in an interview this year, why do you love to torture your characters so much? It's like, no, you don't understand at all. I don't love to torture the characters. I love to torture the readers. Just that the characters are the best way to get to them. So they're just caught in the middle. They're in the way. And that's pretty much how it goes.
In Cold Days, I noticed a distinct lack of the Lananshi. And since she is a part of the Winter Court, I was wondering what happened to her.
Okay, whenever you see, I'll just share this with you because this doesn't give away anything really. But if there's a book where you see Mab, you probably won't see the Lananshi and the other way around. When Mab's busy doing stuff with Harry, the Lananshi's covering her other stuff.
Oh,
and
so
vice versa.
So she's her number two.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Lananshi is Mab's lieutenant. And so when Mab is wasting her time doing stuff with Harry, Lananshi is minding the store.
Number one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question. Will we ever find out who Mab was before she was Mab? Or?
Will we ever find out who Mab was before she was Mab? You can find out if you want.
What?
And the room goes quiet.
Look, man, I hardly make up anything. I mostly just steal it. So you can go find the same sources I stole it from and work it out.
I've noticed that Mab and Titania seem to have magic increases and weanings based on the seasons in Chicago. So when it's winter in Chicago, why doesn't Titania draw magic from, I don't know, it being summer in Australia?
She can, but then if she's not in Australia, it doesn't help much. It's one of those things where really she's not all that much weaker. It's just that Mab has the edge whenever winter's there, which is why when they fight, they try and do it at one of the solstices, so that
evens out.
They're even, because otherwise the other one won't take the fight. So they've got to find a point where they're balanced, and the Fate Courts are all about balance. Yeah, I mean, Titania could show up and do a fight, but she'd be pulling her stuff all the way from Australia, while Mab would have, the whole Great Lakes in Canada right there. And so they did in Chicago, Titania would be down on that one. So that's not you don't go into a fight with Mab and not have an advantage. And on the other hand, Mab doesn't go into a fight with you unless she has an advantage. So it's really tough to square her away for a fight. But right here.
I'm new to the Dresden universe. I don't know how much time there was between changes and Ghost Story, but did you have like a really big backlash for your cliffhanger ending?
It's not a cliffhanger.
I think of it less as a backlash, and what was the online comic that I saw where there was a girl? It was a drawing of a guy reading a copy of Changes. And then at the end of the copy of Changes with his face just like this. And the next frame is a girl on the phone talking to her friend going, "That's weird. What? I just felt something, a disturbance in the force as if millions of nerds had suddenly cried out in agony." And then the next frame says, "And we're suddenly silenced?" No, they're still crying out. So I think of it less as a backlash and more as extremely gratifying feedback. I did have things thrown at me occasionally over the course of the next year, and then I would say, if you injure me, I'll never be able to finish the next book, and it would stop. So I clearly went mad with power.
Why is Chicago as opposed to anywhere else?
Why Chicago as opposed to anywhere else? I originally set the books in Kansas City, my hometown. But my writing teacher told me I couldn't do that. And I said, why? She says, you're already walking close enough to Laurel Hamilton's toes that you don't need to set your book in Missouri. I said, oh. She said, pick somewhere else. I said, where? She says, doesn't matter, anywhere. And there was a globe on her desk with 4 American cities on it. And the American cities on the globe were Washington, D.C., which I didn't want to write because then you'd have to write politics. There was New York, which I didn't want to write because the editors all know all your mistakes that you make in New York, and besides, superheroes have its own album. There was L.A., which I didn't want to write because it was like L.A. And then the other city was Chicago, so I said Chicago. She says, fine, whatever, just not Missouri. So that was why. That's not a very glamorous reason, but it's the truth. Back here, black shirt.
At the beginning of the series, the first books you see, Harry just does whatever he wants as long as he feels it's the right thing to do. And beyond some, like the war with Red Court stuff, there's not much of a bad fallout until Ghost Stories, where he's dealing kind of with the fallout of the previous book. Are we going to see kind of a shift in maybe how he reacts to things based off of that? Because he kind of had to deal with those consequences, or is he going to kind of still be the same guy?
You can't ever escape the consequences of your actions. That's one of the laws of the real universe. And it's just as true in the Dresden Files. So you're going to see a lot of different things. And Harry's, a lot of the choices that he made got him in trouble and got him in increasing levels of trouble. And that's not going to stop anytime soon.
I mean, he didn't feel sorry for him in the beginning of the book. So the whole war with Red Court, he was cool with it because it was doing the right thing. But he's talking with the ghost in the graveyard. He's taking a look at himself and wondering if they were the right decisions, seeing his friends in the fallout. So I didn't know if that's going to change how he perceives things later on.
Continue reading. Because I've got to keep writing, or they'll take my house away. Yeah.
Have you ever seen anything that you couldn't explain that ended up being included in one of the Dresden Files?
No, I haven't included any of that stuff in the Dresden Files. Yeah.
Some of what I'm going to ask about is interpreted from things like the book, book covers, and also disabuse me if I got this wrong, but it looks like for Simon Green's Nightside series, read the first one, it didn't quite hang together, and then started seeing that Jim Butcher had edited with him. I was wondering about that because as soon as your name started showing up, the Nightside snapped into sharp focus.
They wrote me and said, Jim, would you blurb this book for Simon? And I met Simon, and he's a nice guy. So I said, yeah, sure, send it to me. And I read the first one. And I think I think it kind of took him a book or two to get his feet underneath him in the dark side or the night side. And then after that, it got kind of good. And I've enjoyed that series. But yeah, I mean, that was just an issue of, hey, Jim, will you blurb a book? And they used to send me books all the time. They still send me books all the time, but now I've kind of learned to say, no, I can't blurb the book. Because I'm busy doing my own stuff. But back here.
Hi. You've written about the winter court and the summer court. Is there anything that you've thought about for the Dresden universe where there are going to be fairies that don't play by the traditional rules? Maybe like a neutral, do our own thing type court?
Well, there's not a court. The fairies that don't conform are busy not conforming. They're too busy not conforming to make a court like the other ones. So that's the wild fae, and they just don't care. If you look at and most of the goblins, they don't play by the court rules. Their king does nominally, but I mean that's one of those deals where Mab's like you got to bend the knee and say you work for me, and then I'll leave you alone. And basically, so he's like, yeah, okay, whatever. I can show up. I can show up to dinner once a year. Because that's how we do it without going to war with each other, that sort of things. That's counterproductive, and then I don't get to kill as many things, and that's much more fun. Yeah, Rick.
Any idea which month Skin Game's going to come out? And the books that you've come out with, all of them to this point, they seem to lend themselves really well if you're going to make a movie versus a TV series. Has that idea made its way to you yet?
Oh, well, I just hate the idea of there being a movie. It repulses me. And although there are people from Hollywood outside my home every day leaving offerings of pumpkin pie ale. No, none of them caught my eye yet. It's not up to me. You wait for a company to come to you. So it's going to be there are talks going on with production company. It looks like things are moving in a good direction, but there's nothing for certain yet. In Hollywood, nothing is certain until the check is cleared. Thank you. Overwhelming amount of blessings. Just have to be thankful the Pope said it was okay to do that. We'll see if anything comes of it. It would be really neat if it did. I actually think that it would be better off as a feature series like Game of Thrones. I think it would be awesome.
HBO would be great for that.
Yeah, and that would be awful. Game of Thrones. People would. Oh no, I'd never get away from it then. Yeah.
Do you have a fantasy cast if there was something like that?
Do I have a fantasy cast? Right now, I think I would take Fassbender or Hiddleston as Dresden.
I go Fassbender.
And then the other one could play Thomas. But I gotta say, after seeing Hiddleston at San Diego Comic-Con, that guy, I don't know if he's actually personally a nerd, but he's on his way to being a convert. Because I don't know if you saw the video of him appearing as Loki at Comic-Con. Okay, if you haven't seen it, in this video, I mean, he kind of appears and you can sort of see him going, I can't believe I'm standing here as Loki, getting set to deliver the Loki speech. He looks a little self-conscious about it. And the crowd goes wild, and all of a sudden he realizes, oh my gosh, I'm in a room with people who love me. And it's like he's been suddenly clubbed over the head with nerd enthusiasm. This is what we have to. This is what we do. And you just sort of see him get into it after that and roll with it. And I think he would make a fine convert to that sort of thing. Yeah, Harry, you give back the glasses.
You might have to wait.
If you had to spend an entire month as one of your characters.
No, it's okay, stop, keep going.
What would you do?
If I spent an entire month as one of my characters?
As one of them.
As one of them.
Yeah, you had to live their life.
Oh, I guess I would have to crush myself and be Thomas for a while. Because that poor guy, I I don't need to dwell in his suffering, and having walked a mile in his shoes and done my penitence that way. Yeah, here's back.
I got a question for you. He changes when Harry's with the Wild Fae. He's warned not to use Mab's name 3 times or he's going to summon her. In Cold Days, when he's talking constantly about the fact that Mab might be nuts, he uses her name all over the place, over and over and over. And I'm like, okay, if he's worried about taking her out, isn't he not supposed to be using the name at that point?
If he does, if she does, it's likely to grab her attention. On the other hand, he's grabbed her attention pretty much as thoroughly as any mortal can already. So it's not going to get him in any hotter water than he's already in.
In Codex Alaria, did you do any research for your character dynamic with the military? Did you ever shadow any military groups or anything?
I did not.
Okay.
I did not get to do any actual doing military stuff. That would have been cool, except that the guys that are busy doing that do things in dangerous spots. But my father was military. My dad was Ranger Signal Corps in Korea, and so I paid attention to him a lot. He was one of those soldiers that never talked about it, and I didn't find out until I went up into the attic one day, and I found this old trunk, and there was a coat, and there was a photo album, some other stuff in there, and a knife, and I went downstairs. I'm like, Dad, what's this coat with the wing and dagger patch on it? And he's like, oh, that just means I was dumb enough to jump out of a perfectly good airplane. And it's like, well, what's this? And he starts showing me all these pictures. He's like, yeah, here's all the weapons I was certified in, and these are all the U.S. weapons, and these are the British weapons, and the Russian weapons, and the German weapons. And were you a sharpshooter? And he looks like, no, son. Sharpshooter is somewhat below expert. I was an expert in these weapons, and I was the platoon's knife and unarmed combat fighting instructor as well. And I kind of stop and look at him, and he looks at me and he says, "What do you think about that?" And I said,